welcome to our Retire Early lifestyle. So why make a video that most people aren't going to like? Because it isn't true that most people won't like it. People know that this information is valuable. They aren't necessarily ready to admit it. All of the elements that create the same reoccurring cycles all over the globe are reoccurring and therefore predictable. That's how we were able to predict in our previous videos what was going to happen in this country or that country, and you will be able to do the same thing with our information. Well, let's get started. Are you ready? There are many good reasons why some people live abroad for, and there are many good reasons why some people stay abroad for, at least for longer than the 1 to 5 years. And we're a testament to that, as we lived abroad for 13 years and enjoyed many aspects of life abroad, and here we are in a new chapter in our lives back in the U.S. This video information is about the people who are intentionally deceiving you, enticing you, pushing everyone into the move abroad box, even when they know themselves that moving abroad is not something most people should be doing. They are the people who have a vested interest in telling you how great and wonderful living abroad is, and that's why you should move abroad too. So let's get started with this information you're waiting for. We're counting down to number 1 with the deceivers who get much more pushing as we get lower in number. Number 5. The deceivers deceive because they don't want backlash from the travel abroad pumpers. Why aren't there enough people speaking out against the horrible misinformation that plagues the live abroad realm? One could list many reasons, but chief among them is human psychology. That is to say, people are naturally wired to not appear to admit they made a mistake, and going along with that, they certainly would not want that appearance to be public. And the next one is, people are also naturally wired to go along to get along. Don't tip the apple cart, so to speak. Don't you know it's not cool to say anything bad about living abroad, or you'll be pounced upon from the cheerleaders? For example, and this is only one example, saying there are deadly parasites in the water in developing countries is rarely talked about. And people all over the internet will tell you the water is safe to drink in their country, but it's a blatant lie. When we say shameless promotion, it's an understatement. The pumpers don't want to turn anyone away from thinking they are living in perfect paradise. It's unfortunate that many people feel that they can't talk about the truth of why they came home because of the fear of backlash from others. Did you know that many folks are afraid to say the real reason why they left and came back home? It's true. They suddenly remember things like they couldn't get their apple pie filling, or they had to come home because of a family emergency, or here's a good one, it was too expensive. But the reason they went abroad in the first place is because they were told they would have a better quality of life. And maybe you will, but who is to say? Isn't it your life and experiences? If anyone says they don't like something about the culture, they'll get pounced on like it's their fault. They like to say it's because Americans are not well traveled, but that's not the entire story. We said in the last video, you're smart for coming home, and we sincerely believe that. Also, Americans are getting a bad rap from the locals across the world because they're having problems adapting to their customs. This is exactly why moving abroad should not be something people are pushed or enticed into doing, and that's the biggest problem right there. Just recently on this channel, more and more expats have told us they came home because they were having a difficult time integrating within the culture, and they felt like a walking ATM, besides feeling isolated from the community. Well, we all know why. The biggest reason is the language barrier, and you're dealing with a culture that has much, much less than you do, even when you go to countries like Italy and Portugal. Americans are a misfit in most other countries. I think they would do fine in the UK, New Zealand, Ireland, Canada, and Australia, however. Little bit more similar to their financial means, and plus no language barriers. The Irish love Americans and their accent. The live abroad trumpeters tell us with gusto how great everything is, but expats coming home are telling us a different story? Something doesn't add up. What do you think? On to number 4. Well, they have a travel relocation service or an expat financial service, and they have to say good things about living abroad. There is way too much peddling of services that help people in the transition to certain countries abroad. But be very careful with these companies. The truth is, you don't need them to help you move abroad. Once you get to a location, and if you feel uncomfortable because of the language barrier, simply hire a bilingual then. Don't waste your money hiring a relocation service or spending thousands on seminars. Many are way overpriced and overrated, and frankly, you don't need them. The other thing we're seeing with some of these expat financial services is how they're now telling people to move to certain countries where Americans have nothing in common with that country. They have a totally different value system, political system, and religious system. If you have a difficult time adapting to moving to a different state, moving to Timbuktu probably isn't going to work out for you. This is very unprofessional, if you ask us, and very unrealistic to send people to these faraway, foreign, possibly dangerous lands that are so different than what people are used to. You can't change the feathers of different birds and think there isn't going to be a chicken fight. No matter how much you try and entice hens and turkeys into the duck pond, they're not going to get along. But you go ahead and keep pushing those unfamiliar countries onto the unbeknownsts. We're just shaking our heads. We're so glad we quit promoting countries to people 12 years ago. Moving on to number 3. It's Retire Abroad Media shameless promotion and their vlogger gangs. Our viewers already know this one, but for our new people on here today, moving to the Retire Abroad Media's top 10 global index countries is setting yourself up for probable failure for all the reasons we talk about on this channel, such as it's overpriced, overrated, and overpromoted countries that do not have your best interests at heart. They just want to sell you their overpriced and often needing renewals every year visas, or their overpriced cement properties that you can build in the USA for half the price just so you can be a resident for 5 years. The top 10 global index list is the same old countries they list year after year after year, which wouldn't be that bad, but everyone moves to the same handful of cities and towns in those countries, and they become so overwhelmed with foreigners that it ends up ruining the place. Let's move on to number 2, vested interests. The vested interests are invested in the country in some way through owning property they want to sell to other foreigners. They have property they need to rent to other foreigners because they can't get the big rents from the locals. Maybe they own apartment complexes and they Airbnb them out to foreigners. Real estate developers and investors find out about these new places by reading the business websites like Forbes, and then they travel there before you, usually, not always, but oftentimes, and they buy land and buildings cheap, and you know the rest of the story. Don't think the ones putting out promotions aren't getting big stakes out of their marketing either. That's the Retire Abroad Media. The Retire Abroad Media get in on the real estate market before they pump it to you. They know that they can't go wrong once the millions of eyes see where you can live like a king on $2,500 a month, have a maid at your beck and call, and you can live in eternal spring in paradise. Just choose one of our top 10 cities or countries and you will have the world. And then there are other countries themselves. The tourist ministry of the country comes up with these great ideas for the retired folks, the digital nomads, and the rich investors who want to invest in real estate, and they all make a bunch of money off their visas and from you just moving there and spending like a mad person. They know Americans have high standards. That's why they love you while you're spending big bucks on their $1 million cement apartment buildings. But things change because when thousands and maybe millions of locals start complaining to their government that they can't afford rent in their own city, or they can't afford to buy a home in their own city, or they were kicked out of their home so it could be turned into an Airbnb, the government ends up changing laws, and those laws are never geared for the foreigner. Did you hear about Turkey? Too many foreigners now moving there and too much gentrification, and they're now making Airbnb owners have a license, which the guy in the video says they're very hard to get, and they're now taxing people greatly on their Airbnbs. So this is what's happening. I bet all those foreigners who invested in turning apartments into Airbnbs never thought that would happen. Apparently, thousands of foreigners are selling their properties and are now leaving paradise. I mean, Turkey. If you want a confirmation, just type in expats leaving Turkey. And you can also watch the video. It just came out just a few hours ago. Thousands of expats are leaving Turkey. The real truth is, the rich just get richer and the locals become displaced and poorer. This is the real gentrification and where that term got started. It's very important for people to see that what is happening in these countries is exploitation of the foreigners who move there for a better life and a cheaper life. That would be you. And essentially, they need you to move there. And so the promotions get out of hand, way out of hand, and that's what we're seeing today. Moving on to our last one on the list, here we go, the shills. The shills are not always bought and paid for. Some just enjoy lying to your face. The internet is full of shills about living in paradise where nothing bad ever happens, where the crime is very low and where the weather is eternal spring and where it's just so much better than the U.S. The shills are the worst of the bunch because they do all of these things we've shared with you so far and more. Let me tell you who the shills are because they are very cunning at what they do, and you will probably be deceived, especially if you want to move abroad really bad. Not only do they deceive you with everything is great and better than the USA, but they omit the very important things that you would leave over, okay? The shills usually never have anything negative to say about a place, and if they do say anything negative, it is something very superficial that most people wouldn't let it break their decision to move abroad. Many of the pro and con videos you see are very superficial. I mean, why people don't talk about the ever-present deadly parasites in the water in developing countries and even in parts of Europe on their con side of the list? We're just shaking our heads. Very rarely do you hear about this, but it can make some people very sick. Why don't they talk about how Italy has some of the highest tax rates to the American residents that go there in the EU, and they will tax your IRA retirement income. It's something like 43%. Yikes! Oh my goodness. This man says, this comment on one of our videos called 3 Good Reasons Not to Move to Italy During Your Retire Early Lifestyle. He said, I won't retire in Italy because they will tax my Roth 457 and I'm not paying 43% in taxes. I'll just visit once in a while and then leave. This man was smart and did his research. People are in a big hurry to rush to Italy and live out the sweet life, but the land of vita dolce is sour grapes. We could find so many things wrong that you are never told in every single country that would make you cringe with disgust, but we won't do that today. People think our videos are negative. It's because they have to be to balance out all of the omissions, deceptions, and blatant lies and propaganda about moving abroad. You should watch Why We Left Italy video above. It is very informative, and the shills and the retire abroad media hate it. That tells you something. Well, we hope you enjoyed this information today. We know it is a lot to take in, but all things need to be considered carefully and wisely before we rush onto a Boeing 747 and move to Timbuktu. Blessings to all. Take care and bye-bye.